Am I the asshole for buying my cousin's dream car to prove a point? I, 26-year-old female, work a corporate job at a major fast food chain. I won't say the exact title, but I don't work at an office and spend most of my time visiting and coaching stores and associates. Because of this, my family seems to be under the impression that my job is a loser job, despite me making well over $150,000 a year. I think this perception is exasperated by the fact that I'm a frugal person who doesn't tend to surround myself with expensive things. My cousin, 34-year-old male, is a physics professor at a nearby state university and has done very little to hide the fact that he looks down on my job. From what I understand, we make similar money, but he's still paying off his doctorate degree. I didn't go to college. He has a much bigger house and mortgage and 2 kids. I'm child-free, meaning I have much more disposable income than him. For nearly 2 years, he's been talking about how he really wants a Tesla Model X and how he's slowly saving money for it. He'll joke about how much he wants it by describing how he sees it in his dreams in exquisite detail. Well, several months back while we were at my aunt's birthday party, my cousin made yet another backhanded joke about when I get a real job and make real money, and it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was so beyond done. I went back home immediately after the party and ordered a Tesla Model X for myself, exactly to the specifications he has described. So, a couple of weeks ago, I picked up my car and brought it home. I didn't tell a single soul in my family I bought it. But yesterday, I had plans to pick up my cousin's older son to babysit, and I knew it was finally time. I rolled up to my cousin's house in my shiny new Tesla that I washed and polished just that morning specifically for this meetup. Needless to say, cousin was pissed. He asked me all about it with strained enthusiasm and got visibly more angry the more he noticed it was just like the one he wanted. So, in what I would assume was retaliation, he tried to make a comment about, wow, it must have been an adventure and a half to find a bank willing to give you a loan like this. I laughed him off and casually told him I wouldn't know since I paid in cash, which is true. He questioned me, so I pulled up a picture on my phone of the title with my name on it. I think that was what broke him because he quickly ended the conversation and went back inside. But now I've been getting messages from his siblings saying how I'm a petty bitch. Even my mom said that she thought he was an ass, but I shouldn't have escalated just because I could. And while I adore my new car, getting back at my cousin wasn't as satisfying as I thought I'd be. So I'm really beginning to wonder if I am the asshole here. Am I? Am I the asshole for ruining my niece's birth over a name? I, 29 female, was pregnant with twins a few years ago. Unfortunately, only one baby survived, a little boy who we called Henry, and my daughter who passed, we called her Daphne. My sister and I were close growing up, but we drifted apart. There was a rivalry on her part after I met my partner. For example, she hated that we got engaged before her. She has been with her partner for 3+ more years, and she threw a fit saying she wouldn't attend our wedding unless she was engaged too. So they got engaged, and threw an engagement party the night before my wedding. When I announced my pregnancy, she wasn't happy, as I'd done another thing before her, but when my daughter died, she seemed to be a lot nicer. Because of this change, we made her Henry's godparent. She became pregnant recently and refused to announce the name until a few days after birth. The baby girl was called Theodora, which is beautiful. I was bringing presents to her, and I saw my dad building a huge toy box with the name Daphne on it. When I questioned this, I was told the baby is going to be called Daphne and only Theodora on paper. No one will use her full name, only her nickname. All of my family knew and supported her. I got upset and started shouting, asking if this was a cruel prank. She came out and told me to F off. I don't own a name, and she liked it since my baby's funeral. My family are on her side and say, why do I care? My baby is not here, so there is no confusion, and don't see why I caused a scene and ruined her happy time, and why can't I be happy for her? They're saying I'm being petty and cruel. They want me to apologize, but I don't want to. So, am I the asshole for getting upset over choosing my dead baby's name?
Storytime about how my wife is trying to turn herself into Kim Kardashian with plastic surgery. She even acts and dresses like Kim Kardashian. Disclaimers is not my storytime, I sent me on Instagram. My wife has always been a beautiful woman, but ever since 2016 she started talking about getting plastic surgery. Of course I supported the idea. We are both business owners and we lack no money. She even looked at the plastic surgeon that Kim Kardashian uses, and we went to visit him in Beverly Hills. He told my wife that with 3 surgeries he could make her look like Kim Kardashian. When I heard 3 surgeries, I got really scared and tried to talk her out of it, but she was obsessed and said that she would do the surgery. I had no choice but to just support her. We stayed in Los Angeles for 2 weeks in a hotel while she recovered. 4 months after her surgery, she was really happy with the results. But then she started changing her face. And this is where I started to put my foot down. She began to get all sorts of fillers in her face. She even did that thing where they lift the corners of your eyes and your eyebrows. By the end of the year, she had spent over $100,000 on surgeries. She basically got her whole body done. I will admit, her body did look amazing, but the face was the problem for me. The woman I fell in love with was not the woman that she was anymore. Her lips were ginormous. It was like kissing a pair of balloons. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my wife is trying to turn herself into Kim Kardashian with plastic surgery. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. After she started getting all the fillers to her face, it really changed and she did look different. And I didn't like it. Her lips were way too big. It got to the point where I was actually embarrassed to take her around my parents' house. Like I said in part 1, her body looked amazing, but her face just wasn't it. I told my parents about how I felt, and they told me I should just be honest with her. So I explained to my wife that I didn't like her new face. I asked her if she could get some of the filler dissolved, not all of it, and she totally flipped out. She said I was being selfish and insensitive, so I had to drop the conversation. conversation. But things started to get even worse. She started getting a lot of attention from men. Everywhere we'd go, guys would stare at her, and she would constantly get hit on, even in front of me. I'm not the type of guy to get into fights like that, but I was really close sometimes. Like I said, she also started dressing like Kim Kardashian. She would buy all the clothes from Skims, and she would basically wear lingerie out to dinner. I asked her if she could put on a jacket once, and she told me that I didn't understand her fashion. This is when she also started posting a lot to Instagram. Her Instagram was growing really quickly, and all she kept posting were thirst traps. Once again, I asked her if she could take down some of her posts, but she said no. She obviously enjoyed all the attention, and this made me really insecure. I asked her if there was something that was lacking in our relationship, but of course she said no. One day she got a DM from a very famous athlete asking her to go out. She joked about having an open relationship and how much better her life would be if she was single. This cut me deep. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my wife is trying to turn herself into Kim Kardashian with plastic surgery. Disclaimers are not my story time. Send me on Instagram. After she started getting DMs from all these athletes, my insecurity got so bad that I asked her to close her Instagram. Then one day out of nowhere, she asked me if we could have an open relationship. Of course I said no. Then she threw a tantrum and told me that all her surgery would go to waste if she wasn't able to date other men, especially all the famous people that were sliding into her DMs. I couldn't believe what she was saying. I felt like I had to agree to the open relationship, otherwise she would leave me. Now she goes on dates with all these athletes. One of them even flew her out to New York. My parents and family want me to get a divorce, but I don't want to. I still love her, and after all, she's my wife. Now she's even buying all the designer clothes that Kim Kardashian posts on her Instagram. If you looked at her Instagram, you'd think you were looking at Kim Kardashian. A few days ago, she ripped my heart out by telling me that she didn't want children. She had worked too hard and paid too much money for her body, and she didn't want to ruin it now. That's when I grabbed her phone and took it away from her. I locked myself in the bathroom and deleted her Instagram account. I even deleted all the male contacts in her phone. I told her I'd cut her off financially if she doesn't start behaving again. My family thinks I'm becoming too obsessed with her, but I don't want to let her go. Now she's not talking to me because of the whole Instagram thing. I also threw away all of her Skims clothes. Part of me thinks I should just let her do whatever she wants and still stay with her. I love her too much. What should I do?
Am I the asshole for making my brother leave after he brought his kids to my child-free wedding? My wife and I got married days ago. We decided the wedding will be child-free. We thought this was the best option considering several factors from budget to keeping the order, etc. Everyone got an invitation, but my biggest concern was how my brother Ramsey, 36, was going to react. Ramsey married young and has 4 kids that he takes everywhere he and his wife goes. They're always there at every family event. The kids are grade A hyperactive to say the least. I gave Ramsey the invitation in person, and he read it out loud in a sarcastic tone and then said, "Child-free, huh?" I nodded, and he got somewhat mad saying, "Are you serious?" But my children have never been excluded from any big or small event, let alone their own uncle's wedding. I said sorry, but it's already been decided, and everyone had to follow the rules, not just him. He started off for a minute, and then to my surprise he said, "I totally get it, man. No children means no children. No worries." I was glad he didn't start an argument over it and seemed to accept the rule. The day of the wedding came, and Ramsey and his wife didn't show up until shortly before the ceremony began. My best man noticed that Ramsey had arrived and had all his kids with him. I was legit mad, and I went to meet him at the entrance and saw he brought all his kids against me and my wife's wishes. I greeted the kids and asked my sister-in-law to take them back to the car. He loudly asked what the F was wrong with me. I asked why he brought his kids and who said it was okay. He said no one, but he was planning on bringing the kids all along and figured that by initially agreeing to my rule, then showing up with the kids anyway would get me to agree on letting them stay. I stated this was no event for kids for many reasons and that everyone respected the rule except him. He complained about me disrespecting him and his kids since, again, he never attends any event without them. In his words, "Wherever I go, my kids follow, period." I told him he needed to leave then. Not only did he call me a lunatic, but a terrible brother and terrible uncle. He also called me a simp for agreeing to his wife's stupid rule, saying that if it was him and his wife even hinted he couldn't have his family's kids at their wedding, he would have dropped her right there and then. It was humiliating and loud enough for the guests to notice. My in-laws did too. I told him to leave, and that's when my mom and aunt tried to convince me to let it go and let them stay, but I refused and had him leave after a massive argument between us. To say that I felt absolutely shitty is an understatement. Everyone gave me grief ever since that incident and are siding with Ramsey, saying I wronged him and acted cold towards him and his kids when they showed up to celebrate me and my wife. My dad is especially pissed at me for potentially permanently effing up my relationship with Ramsey, his wife, and kids by kicking them out of my wedding. He quoted Ramsey won't ever forget this day. So, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my family meet my daughter after all of them dropped out of my wedding upon finding out my wife was pregnant? I come from a conservative Christian family. All my family members were/are involved in the church and have church-based jobs. When they met my wife, they loved her and embraced her as their own. We dated for 2 years and discovered she was pregnant after we got engaged. Invitations were already given at the time, and we decided to still have the wedding on the date when my wife was 5 months in. My family was furious when they found out my wife was pregnant. They asked if we were even still considering having a wedding. I said why not, but they were very upset, especially my mom and dad, who said that they've always been known for their decency and good Christian values, and they weren't willing to let this stain their reputation, as in my wife and I getting married while pregnant. They officially dropped out and refused to negotiate, saying it was done and I have only myself to blame for this outcome and should have moved the wedding to out of town. I was hurt and I tried to change their minds and checked with other members, but my brother said he had no intentions to look like a joke in front of his fellow church members and dropped out too. My aunt pretended to be sick and said she may not be able to make it. She's 100% healthy. My cousin said he had a business trip and stopped his wife and kids from attending, and my uncle cussed me out, tore up the invitation, and kicked me out. I felt terrible with no family members of my own to support me and share my joy at my wedding. I even broke down crying after the ceremony. I haven't spoken to them for months and then got busy with my 4-week-old daughter. My cousin reached out to hand me gifts and well wishes for the birth of my daughter sent from my family. I returned everything. He sat with me on behalf of my family and said I shouldn't have returned the gifts and that they were from my family who want to see and hopefully be involved in my daughter's life. He said my mom's longing to meet her grandbaby and everyone else is wanting to visit soon to celebrate my daughter's life. I said, wasn't my daughter the reason why the entire lot of them abandoned my wedding? My daughter at some point will ask about the wedding and I have no intentions on lying to her. He just started stuttering as I went on about how they treated my daughter as someone to be ashamed of and hide. He replied saying he guaranteed I got it all wrong and no matter what goes down between us, I can never deny that my daughter is their granddaughter/niece, etc., and that they're family. He asked that I arrange for them to visit, but I refused. My wife says I should let them come, but I still refuse. So, am I the asshole?
Storytime about how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. I was sending me on Instagram. I'm 45 years old and my husband is 10 years younger than me. When we first got married, my friends kept telling me not to marry someone so much younger. They told me that he would eventually cheat and leave me for someone younger. I refused to believe this hope because my husband and I really loved each other. Or at least I thought. We met at a party a few years ago and he made the first move right away. He asked me out on a date and a few weeks later we became boyfriend and girlfriend. A few years after that we got married and after years of trying we finally got pregnant and had twins. They are both 2 years old now. My husband's job requires him to travel a lot. I own a really big salon and business is good, so we have a pretty good life and are able to afford a lot of things for our kids. Since my husband travels, my schedule has to be really flexible. I take care of the kids in the morning and then I go off to work, leaving them with the nanny. Our first nanny was a lot older and she had lots of experience, but she unexpectedly quit on us, so we had to find another one. We decided to look for one of those nanny agencies. We ended up interviewing about 5 nannies, but my husband was set on one of them, and she was the youngest out of all of them, 18. Oh yeah, and the most attractive too. My husband told me that maybe we should try someone younger so that the kids can have fun, and I said yes. The nanny would cover for me for about 4 hours a day when I was at work. Her and I started to get along really, really well. She would tell me about her boy troubles and I would give her advice. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. The nanny and I started to become really good friends. I even started telling her about the problems I was having with my husband. Little did I know that she was the problem. Like I said in part 1, my husband travels a lot. This is what we would usually fight about. You see, it was actually really easy for him to travel less. All he had to do was pick a different region for his job. Instead of a 6-hour flight, it could have been a 2-hour trip. His excuse was that he would get paid less. When I was telling the nanny about our issues, she told me that I should just let it go and let my husband have his freedom. But the way she said it really bothered me. I ended the conversation and told her that she could go home. When my husband came home, I mentioned to him what the nanny said. I told him that I didn't like the way she told me that I needed to give him his freedom. He started to laugh and said she's just a young girl. She's probably just saying what she thinks you need to hear. I decided to listen to my husband and I let it go. A week later, the nanny comes over to take care of the kids. By the way, as soon as she would come to my house, I would serve her a plate of food or make her anything she wanted before I left to work. She sat down to eat. I could see her messages on her phone, and the name on the messages was the same as my husband's. I asked her why she was messaging my husband and she quickly put her phone in her purse. She didn't even know what to say. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. When I asked her why she was messaging my husband on her phone, she did not know what to say. I asked her if she was okay. Then she replies with, I just needed some advice for my car. She was so nervous. I asked her to pull out her phone and give it to me. That's when she said no and started putting up a fight. She told me I had no right to check her phone, but I didn't believe her. I ripped her purse from her hands and grabbed the phone. Before I even have a chance to look at the messages, she starts calling me fat and old, and that my husband is planning to leave me for her. Honestly, what she was saying didn't faze me because my goal was to look at the messages. And she was pretty much right. In the messages, my husband promised her to leave me for her, and that he was sick of me and the kids. I begin to scroll up and see all of the pictures that they send each other. You can imagine what they were. By the way, the nanny was only a day from turning 18. Yep. Out of nowhere, she starts breaking plates and glasses and verbally abusing me. She even said that if I didn't leave him alone, that something bad would happen to me. I grabbed her by the arm and threw her out of the house. But I kept her phone, so I called my husband from the phone. When he hears my voice, he hangs up the phone. When he finally got home, we got into a 6-hour fight. I made him leave the house, but apparently the nanny went crazy. She started stalking him and he had to get a restraining order against her. Serves him right. Her parents are threatening to press charges. I don't want my kids to grow up without a father, but I don't want to get back with him. What should I do?
Am I the asshole for not having my stepdaughter in the family photo? I, 32 female, and my husband Jack, 36 male, have 3 kids together. Lydia, 5, Carol, 2, Solomon, 8. Jack has a nephrine, 8 female from a different marriage. It's our last week of summer before the kids start school, so we decided to rent a lovely little beach cottage for the week. It's a common theme in my family to take Christmas card photos while on vacation, so naturally I wanted to take the photos while we were away. Here's a problem. Jack is white, but Anefrine's mom is black and she turned out looking very much like her. I don't care what race she is, but my parents, however, are pretty racist. I have limited contact with them for several reasons, so they've never met Anefrine, but we're on Christmas card terms. I don't want to send them a card that Anefrine is on because they will make a fuss about the certain word with the hard R child. So my plan was to take pictures with just me, husband, and bio kids for my parents and a couple other relatives, and then have her be in the picture for Jack's family and our friends. But when I called picture time and told Anefrine she wasn't going to be in this picture but the next one, she started to look upset. I did let her take our pictures, which lifted her spirits, and we got some lovely pictures with her too. We also got some ice cream and she hasn't been upset beyond that initial moment. The trouble came later when Jack asked why I didn't want Anefrine in the photo. He said he thought it was maybe so I could get one with all of my kids. I didn't want to lie to him, so I told him why, because I don't want Anefrine to be exposed to people who could potentially and emotionally hurt her. Just like that, he went from being understanding to pissed. And I guess he said, she didn't want you in her picture because you're black, or something like that to his daughter, and now she's upset with me too. I really wasn't trying to hurt her in any way. I did this out of care and love, but I think I might have done it in a wrong way. So, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for buying my cousin's dream car to prove a point? I don't know what else to do. Okay, you guys know I do a bunch of story times, and a majority of them come from Reddit or from viewer submission that you guys send to me. I always source it out, but yet so many people think these stories are about me, and I have all these life events that I can share with you guys. Not possible. My life is not that interesting. This most recent one that I posted about a 26-year-old girl who works at a fast food franchise, buys a Tesla Model X in spite of her cousin because he always disrespects her job title. People thought that was about me, but I do own a Tesla, so that's why this kind of made it kind of like worse. I woke up one day to a shit ton of comments and DMs on my Instagram bashing my hypothetical cousin. When you go on my Instagram, the first picture is me for my birthday where it says I'm 25. That should be the first indicator that the story is not about me. And then these were all the comments after I posted that video. You guys, it's not me. I love you, but it's not me.
Storytime about how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. TW, if you think this is gross, don't watch. And disclaimers, is not my story time. It's been 10 years since this happened, but when I was in high school, I was really popular. I was in the cheerleading squad, the badminton team, the volleyball team, and drama club. All the teachers knew me and I got along with almost all the students. I never had any problems with girls or guys. My high school principal was a huge history buff, and so was I. One day I went to his office and asked him if I could start a history club. He was really impressed by this and he said yes. I started asking students if they wanted to join, and mostly it was only boys. And these were the boys that I knew had a crush on me, but I made a promise to my parents that I would focus solely on school and not boys. So that meant no boyfriends for me. And I was totally fine with that. I wasn't boy crazy or anything. I really just wanted to get into a good college and make my parents proud. After I formed the club, the principal asked me if he could sit in on some of the sessions. I said, of course. Our history club would get together every Wednesday, and he would always show up without fail. I mean, obviously, I thought that he was interested in history, and he just wanted to share this experience with us, but clearly I was wrong. After a few weeks, things were getting a little strange. When it was my turn to read, I would always notice him staring at me. And he also brought up the fact that there were only boys in the club. I explained to him that they probably just had a crush on me and that at least it was a way to get them into the club. He told me I needed to find girls because I was too much of a distraction for the boys. But the way that he said it just sounded like he was really jealous. I did my best to get girls in the club, but literally nobody wanted to join. After a few days, I realized that maybe the best thing for me was just to cancel the club. I was already in so many other clubs, and I didn't want to sacrifice my grades. I basically told the guys that we weren't going to have the club anymore, and they all said that was totally fine. But when I told the principal, he flipped out. He started yelling at me and told me that if I didn't keep the club going, that I would never make it in life. He said I wasn't being responsible and that I was letting down the club. So then I was basically forced into continuing the club. But then things got even stranger. He started showing up to every single get-together. And every time that it was over, he would ask me if he could walk me to my car. I mean, at first I thought he was just doing it so that I could be careful, I guess. But we were still on school property and I'm pretty sure nothing was gonna happen to me. That's when he started asking me if I had a boyfriend or if I liked any boys. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. Trigger warning, if you find this subject gross, please don't watch. And disclaimer, this is not my story time. That's when my principal started asking me if I was dating any boys or if I had any crushes on boys. I obviously felt very uncomfortable when he asked me this, so I simply answered no. Then he told me that I could be honest with him. That's when I told him that I made my parents a promise because I was so close to graduating high school and avoid any distractions like boys. That's when he said that I was an amazing woman and that he wished more of the female students were like me. I quickly got in my car and went home. By the way, I was 2 months away from graduating from high school. Now this is when things start to get really weird. I started seeing him around everywhere in school. Our school is pretty big, but I kept bumping into him everywhere. Every time I would see him, he would be like, "Ho ho, are you stalking me?" I would laugh it off and continue walking. One day after history club, he asked me to come to his office with him. He said that he had a surprise for me. He took me to his office and gave me a book on history. I thanked him and tried to leave as quickly as possible, but then he said, "Don't you like it?" So I stood there having to pretend that I was happy that he gave me this book, when in actuality, it made me really uncomfortable. That's when he said that he had seen me in the library reading a book on World War II, and that he just wanted to surprise me with the same book. So this was already letting me know 2 things. Number 1, he's watching me around school and at the library. And number 2, I'm not noticing when he's watching me. I was so creeped out, but I managed to keep my cool. I said thank you again and basically ran away. For the rest of that week, I tried to avoid him as much as I could. I didn't go anywhere near his office, and I avoided the library, which was one of my favorite places in the school. At this point, graduation was only a week away. I was totally wrapped up in my studies that I actually forgot about the principal. Until one day I get a friend request from him on Facebook. At first I thought it was weird, but then I accepted because I figured, well, I'm graduating, so I'm not really going to be seeing him anymore. 5 minutes after I accepted his friend request, I get this really long message from him praising me, saying all these great things about me. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said thanks. Finally, the day of graduation came and I was forced to see him face to face. That's when he told me that he actually had another gift for me. That's when he hands me an envelope with a blank check. He had the biggest smile on his face. I told him I couldn't accept it and he got mad. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. After he hands me the blank check, I look at it and tell him that I simply cannot accept it. That's when he gets really angry, snatches the check from me, and tells me that he'll see me later. After the graduation ceremony, I was so happy and I was with my family. That's when he walks up behind me and asks me to keep the check. My family is watching this whole thing go down, by the way. I look at him and say thank you, but no. He then introduces himself to my family. But of course, he doesn't bring up the whole check thing. We all say goodbye and my family and I go have dinner. That very night, he sends me a message on Facebook again, saying that he shouldn't have given me the check, and he felt like he had crossed the line. I actually felt really bad, so I replied asking him to not feel bad. A week later, I get a text message from him. He said that he took the liberty of looking up my phone number and that he actually really wanted to speak to me. He asked if we could meet up for a coffee, and I said yes, unfortunately. We meet up at the coffee shop, and as soon as we sit down, he starts to confess his feelings for me. He said that I was basically his dream girl and that all he wanted was a wife like me. And he also asked me if I would ever consider dating him. I was actually too stunned to speak. As soon as he realized I wasn't saying yes, he asked me not to say anything, got up and left. I ran home and told my parents everything. My parents were really angry. My dad went straight to the cops. The cops told my dad that they had complaints from other students. He apparently did the same thing to them and asked them out once they graduated. And guess what? One of them said yes. The cops even investigated him after.
Am I the asshole for marrying my sister's baby daddy? I, 36-year-old female, and my sister, 29 female, got pregnant when she was 18 years old. I am infertile and knew I couldn't have kids, so when my sister said she was giving her baby up for adoption, I decided to be her mom. My sister went no contact 5 months after giving birth. For a bit of background, my sister got pregnant by a one-night stand and she apparently didn't remember or know the father at the time of birth, but when my daughter V was born, a man T, 35, messaged me on social media claiming to be the father of my child. My sister had run into him at a club and drunkenly confessed to the pregnancy. We met up, he bonded with his daughter, and well, that man is now my husband of 7 years. Coming back to my sister, she called me yesterday. Although I was surprised at her call, I picked up. We made some small talk and then she said she had just gotten married a year back and both of them wanted children but couldn't because her husband was infertile but really wanted kids. I asked her if she wanted to adopt and she said no, she just wanted her baby back. I was speechless for a few moments before replying that if she wants to meet my child as an aunt, she is welcome to, and we can both sit V down and explain the reason for her absence, but she can't just ask me to give up my child. My sister said she'll sue me as she is the birth mother. I told her she was out of her mind, and then I told her how I married the baby daddy, T. She exploded, calling me names and saying I stole her life. My husband came home from work, and when I explained to him, he was beyond furious. I then got a call from my parents saying I was an asshole for telling my sister she's not allowed to see her baby. I never said that, and I welcomed her to bond with V, but they refused to listen and said I was being insensitive and harsh and flaunting my family. I now feel bad because my sister and I were very close growing up, and I feel quite close to her situation since I know the struggles of infertility. My husband said there was no way he was letting my sister have full time alone with V, and I agree, but I want to know if I'm the asshole for being too harsh and telling her about T. Am I wrong for telling my sister her rainbow baby isn't special? I, 27 female, have a set of twins, Ben and Betty. They just turned 6. My sister, 32 female, has Connor, who is 4. My sister and her husband lost their first baby due to SIDS. It was devastating for the whole family and I was behind my sister 100% of the way. I couldn't imagine what it was like. Anyway, when she found out she was pregnant with Connor, we were all excited. The pregnancy went well and Connor got a good bill of health. I I love my sister and I love my nephew, but my sister is convinced that because he's her rainbow baby, that means he can do whatever he wants. Connor is incredibly spoiled and a brat. He throws fits to get his way, hits, kicks, cries, whatever it takes. My sister and her husband give him no discipline. He's their rainbow baby, so that is their excuse for his bad behavior. Their lives are to serve for whatever Connor wants. My twins just turned 6 and we had a small party for them. Everyone was having a good time except for Connor. He wanted cake, didn't like the games, wanted to watch TV, wanted ice cream now, didn't want other kids to touch him, and etc. Basically, the whole party, Connor threw a tantrum. The final straw came at present time. My husband went to get the gifts out of the living room only to find Connor had ripped nearly all of them open. My sister made excuses saying he was just excited and wanted to play with my kids' new toys. I lost it. I told her that Connor isn't special, that he's a brat and he's been ruining the party since he got here. My sister immediately went on that he's her rainbow baby and he didn't mean it and maybe I should have put the presents where he couldn't get to them. They were in the living room and the party was outside. No one was inside. I lost my temper. I know I did. This was my kid's party though. I said some nasty things to her. I told her that Connor isn't a baby anymore and he's not special and she's raising a self-centered brat who will grow up to be a self-centered adult. She left the party and then my parents called. They said they understood my frustrations and everything about the situation. Then they said they still feel like I should apologize to my sister. Why? Because I have 2 healthy kids while she lost one and she's still having to deal with it? I told them no, my sister should apologize for how her son acted at the party. My husband and the guests who were at the party are on my side. My sister hasn't really spoken to me in a few days, just posted passive-aggressive things on social media, which I just blocked. Am I wrong for kicking my brother out for announcing his wife's pregnancy right after I announced my daughter had cancer? Just to make sure I represent both sides of the conflict, my brother and his wife suffered from not having kids for years. It impacted them greatly. They love the kids in the family but always wish to have kids of their own. Lately, we got busy with my daughter Megan, who is 12, with health problems. She started suffering from anemia, loss of appetite, and recurrent fevers. We've taken her to the pediatrician and from there we've learned that she has cancer. It was so devastating, I didn't want to tell my family right away. Most of them have chronic conditions and this type of news might trigger a negative reaction because they love Megan and would give everything to see her healthy. My husband and I decided to gather the family at my house this past Wednesday to announce Megan's diagnosis. My aunt didn't take it well because she holds Megan dear, so she was rightfully the most devastated one. After a few minutes of complete silence, my brother started moving in his seat, saying there's something very serious he wanted to tell everyone. He was hesitant, but then he and his wife stood up, and then he said that they found out that they were finally expecting. The family were conflicted. Some got up to congratulate them, and some remained seated. I remained seated, and my brother then approached me and expressed how sorry he was that they had to tell us in these circumstances, but said he couldn't wait since this is a huge deal for them after years of waiting and because everyone was present. Literally everyone was there since I said the announcement we wanted to make concerned Megan. I argued with him about how he thought this was an appropriate time and asked if Megan mattered to him at all since he didn't take a minute to realize she was just diagnosed with cancer. He started reminding me how many years he and his wife suffered from frustration and disappointment for not being able to have kids and argued that because he wasn't able to be a father until now, he's 37, he felt he was missing out on so much for many years and that I didn't have to finally tell him congratulations but should at least not guilt him for feeling overwhelmed and excited to finally be a father. He said I knew exactly how much he adores Megan and I shouldn't even think otherwise. Then said he was just sharing good news after hearing the bad news and there was nothing wrong with that. I told him and his wife to leave the house right then. He said he won't argue anymore because of how tense I felt but will expect me to apologize at some point. Some family agreed with me but my parents thought I shouldn't have taken my anger out on him like that and that he'll always remember my reaction to the news he gave and should apologize after I've calmed down. Am I wrong for taking my friend to court after she kicked me out of the bridal party for cutting my hair? For my friend's 3-day wedding, I had to buy 3 different dresses, including alterations and specific shoes, which totaled over $700. She also wanted specific hairstyles for each day. Unfortunately, starting in March, my hair started to deteriorate. Due to health reasons, my hair was falling out in chunks, and in May, I made the difficult decision to cut my hair. I told the bride about my decision 2 weeks before the wedding, and she didn't say anything bad. The following week, she came over to my house, and when she was about to leave, she brought up that she was concerned about my haircut, and I told her it would look good even though I wouldn't be in uniform with the other bridesmaids. The following day, I received this message. After our recent conversations, I like to remind you of my boundaries. I've been very accommodating and graceful, but I cannot allow you to disrespect me. As you know, my wedding has been something I've dreamt of for many years. My husband and I have invested a lot of money into the video and photos of this day, and as we reflect on this day in the future, we want to see our vision reflected in the memories. Since I asked each of you to be my bridesmaids in 2019, I've been very clearly and very communicative in my request. The timing of your decision to cut your hair and not come in advance is very upsetting to me. I would have felt respected if you had communicated with me more than a week prior to the wedding, so we could have worked together to find a collaborative solution. Your inconsistencies have concerned me, and while I sympathize with your health conditions, I'm not willing to compromise my vision to accommodate you, or anyone else, when you have informed me in advance and we could have found a better solution. Since this is something you can no longer fully commit to, I need you to please step down from participating in my wedding. This was 3 days before the wedding. I immediately sent her and her husband an invoice asking them to reimburse for the dresses and shoes, keeping in mind that one of the dresses is still in her possession even though I paid for it. I was told I was inconsistent and selfish after I spent the past 2 weeks helping her plan the wedding shower. I worked with another bridesmaid to surprise her with a bridal shower after our bachelorette trip had to be cancelled. I spent hours helping her out with wedding details. When she asked me to help her tone up before the wedding, I sent her a personalized workout program and even went with her to the gym to show her the ropes. When I agreed to be her bridesmaid, I was more than willing to oblige with what she asked, even if at times it was a lot of time and money. So, am I wrong for taking her to court because she kicked me out for cutting my hair?
Story time about how I'm hooking up with my boss's husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. Let's get this out of the way. Yes, I'm a homewrecker. Am I proud of it? No, but just hear me out. A few years ago, I had moved to a new city and didn't have any friends at all. My goal was to get a job and make some new friends. Luckily, I got a job right away. After working there for a few weeks, I noticed that my boss would get really jealous anytime her husband would come into the store. Here's the reason why. Her husband is super attractive. He's like way more attractive than she is. Anyway, there were a bunch of girls that worked at the store. I wasn't the only one, but it was like some kind of unspoken rule that you never spoke to the boss's husband. After a month of working there, I would avoid him at all cost. But here's the thing, he actually would go out of his way to come say hi to me. At first I thought this was flattering, but then I realized I could be playing with fire. So I decided to be really cold towards him. Well, this didn't work because it actually made him want to talk to me even more. A few days later, I get a text from an unknown number. Can you guess who it is? Yep, it's my boss's husband. In the message, he basically said that if he had done anything wrong to let him know because he didn't want me to feel uncomfortable around him. That's when I told him that none of the girls at the store were allowed to talk to him or even make eye contact with him. And that was the reason why I didn't speak to him. He told me that I must have misunderstood because he's friends with all of the girls who work there, which I knew was not true. The next day I go into work and he actually shows up at lunchtime. I was by myself at the store. It's like he almost knew that I was there by myself, so he decided to come over. And he started flirting. He pretty much complimented everything about me and asked me if I was making friends. Then he asked me for permission to follow me on Instagram. Of course, I was like, yeah, you can follow me. After that, we basically talked on Instagram almost every single day. He would watch and reply to all of my stories. One time I posted a story of me having dinner with some guy, and he replied right away and asked me if I was on a date. I said yes. Then he told me that he was actually jealous. I didn't know how to reply, so I just said LOL. Then he said, what are we gonna do about this? I told him probably nothing because his wife would get upset. Then he said, I've got my ways, don't worry. He asked me to go to the movies and we went, and we basically made out the entire time. After the movie, we sat in his car and he told me that he hated his wife and that he was planning on divorcing her. He was even crying. I mean, I had to believe him. He asked me to keep everything secret, and of course I said yes. I mean, I didn't want to lose my job. This went on for 2 months. One day he calls me and tells me that his wife actually read our messages. Part 2 is up. My boss's husband, aka the guy I'm having an affair with, he calls me up to tell me that she actually saw the text messages between us. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. Luckily, he did not save my number under my name. So basically, she saw messages between him and some other girl. He was really freaking out. But that's when I told him this is your way out. According to him, he hated his wife. So I told him this is perfect, just ask her for a divorce. That's when he told me there was no way he would ever divorce her. He told me that she was the only one who made money in the relationship and that if they ever got divorced, she would leave him nothing. He also told me that he was no longer attracted to her, but that the money was just too good and he had to stay in the relationship. At that point, I started feeling really bad. I was under the impression that he absolutely hated her and that she was terrible towards him, but apparently not. Thankfully, she didn't know it was me the one that was messaging him. He actually made up a lie and told her it was some girl from Instagram that he met. When I showed up to work later that day, my boss was in a really bad mood, and I knew why. Suddenly, she tells all of us girls to pull out our phones and open our text messages. My stomach dropped because stupid me had not deleted all the messages. She started going one by one checking everyone's phone, but luckily I was able to delete everything by the time she got to mine. That's when she told us all to go home. As soon as I got in my car, I decided to call him. I told him what had happened and he told me that everything should be under control and that she believes what he said. He asked me if we could meet up and and I said yes. I just couldn't resist the temptation. A few days later, I came into work early by mistake. I find him talking to one of the other girls. When he saw me, he literally backed away from her. I instantly got upset and realized that he had probably been having affairs with a bunch of the other girls. I decided to confront the girl that he was talking to, and she told me the truth. They had been having an affair for a year now, and that he had probably had affairs with all the girls that worked there. No wonder my boss was so paranoid. When I asked him about it, he totally denied it. I kind of want to tell my boss now and just confess everything, but I'd risk losing my job, which pays really well and I actually love. I'm hoping you guys can tell me what to do. Help me.
As much as it pains me to say this, before my daughter turned 17, I didn't feel any love for her. I didn't even like her, really. She certainly thought I did, but on the inside, I just couldn't feel anything but annoyance towards her. She was very manipulative and needed constant attention. I know that this is a common feeling in parents, but I feel so ashamed to actually say it out loud. Two particularly traumatic instances for me were one, where I was going through an extremely tough time and she wasn't there for me. She never gave me support or comfort that I needed, and there is no worse feeling than being betrayed by family. She was a teenager and old enough to know better. And two, there was a period when she was really pestering me to take her to a psychologist, and one time I caught her forcing herself to throw up. I didn't know what to do and felt completely helpless. She's 18 now and lots better. She almost never complains about anything and is always there when I need a shoulder to cry on. My two older children were visiting last night and we were discussing family memories. And while we were joking, I mentioned in passing to her, "You really fucked me up good." She asked what I meant and I told her about the two incidents I mentioned before. She got quiet and eventually said, I really needed your help back then and you just wouldn't. I told her that I needed her help too, but she came back with, "I'm your daughter." I told her, "Yes, and I'm your mother. What's your point?" She ended up going home with her older sister and she won't return any of my calls. Her older sister called and told me that I had really hurt her last night and that I needed to apologize. I personally don't feel like I owe my daughter anything. She abused me her whole life.
Am I the asshole for not wanting my fiance's parents to move in next door? My fiance and I live in a duplex that I inherited from my late aunt. My aunt was wheelchair bound, so her unit was renovated to be wheelchair accessible. The unit my fiance and I live in do not have the same accommodations. My brother's partner is disabled and uses a wheelchair. While they're renting a wheelchair-friendly apartment, their landlord has decided to raise the rent next year by a significant amount. It will put a serious strain on their finances. I told my brother they can move in my aunt's place when their lease is over. We agreed I would charge a token amount for rent and my brother would help me with maintenance. A few days ago, my fiance told me that his father had been diagnosed with cancer. Am I the asshole for not wanting my fiance's parents to move in next door? A few days ago, my fiance told me that his father had been diagnosed with cancer. While thankfully it's not terminal, he does need to undergo chemo for a while. My fiance asked me if his parents could move in next door since we live near the hospital and they currently live 2 hours away. I told my fiance I was fine with his parents moving into our unit with us, but I'm not going back on my agreement with my brother and brother-in-law. He said this wasn't a feasible solution. He argued that my brother can wait another year or so to move in and his dad needs treatment soon. They can renew their lease and I can help them with rent. My in-laws are well off and can afford to rent a place that fits their needs.